Hey everybody, welcome to the Collector Safe Space. It is your boy Dre, and yes, I have been on a little bit of a kick lately. The kick has been interviewing people that have been in the field of education, and this one, folks, is a very special one. I have to start by saying that, like I said just backstage to him a few minutes ago, that Tim and I have been friends for a long time, actually through social media, and to get to interview him is quite an honor and a privilege. So again, this is our friend Tim, who is an Eisner Award nominee, folks. I mean, if we can get an applause, you got to give him an applause because that is an honor in and of itself. And probably one of the hardest working men in education, as well as comics and pop culture. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, man, Dre, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So I have to ask, we have to go back in time because when I had Mike on my show, it felt very shifted. Like we talked a lot of education, a lot of pedagogy, a lot of that. I feel like I need to know the story. What got Tiny Tim into comics?
I had one of those kind of rough childhoods, and it was comics of, and there's a lot of that, and a lot of conversations I've had with creators and artists and writers. There's a lot of that in the comics community, and so it was like, you read these stories about Batman and the X-Men, and these people who really had a rough time, and they didn't give up. And not only did they not give up, they went on to try to make the world a better place. And I found a lot of solace in that as a child, in the few comics that I could afford to read that were really, really well read. And in a lot of ways, it kind of saved me, I think, as a human being. And so G.I. Joe #1 was the first comic I ever, with Larry Hama. I'm very indebted to him. It was the first comic that I saved up my money to buy, and it just kind of went from there.
Wow, like that is just, it's so cool to hear GI Joe. It's always been, from what a lot of people that I've talked to in the past, it has always been like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, the Avengers, X-Men, very typical, prototypical comics. But to hear GI Joe, which I remember, we're relatively the same age, so growing up in that time where GI Joe was, a saving grace, on television and toys, and yes, I can also attest with you that I too come from a nice troubled front from home life because who didn't have who had it easy. I always felt like a true hero had to have the struggle to get to where you are now, to become the hero that you are.
Yep.
And I mean that's tried and true. The stories have always been. I mean, am I perfect? Hell no, I'm far from it. But I think that we strive as educators, as parents, as people to do better. And that's something that I've seen you on this journey that you've embarked on to do. So tell us a little bit about what you do and how this all started and kind of, I don't want to say snowballed in a bad way, but kind of has become this end game Avengers level event in your career.
Yeah, I'm a decade-long overnight success with all this. I always say, like, when I started teaching 2001, like that was the era of, don't let the kids see you smile till Christmas, and don't share anything personal, and here's the book, and here's what you do, and that's what I did for a while. And I didn't share the comic book type stuff. I didn't share my love of hip hop with my kids. And then when Miles Morales came out, I just happened to bring it up in my classroom, and I had this young black kid, that I didn't really talk to that much. Great kid, great student, just quiet like I am. And man, was he fired up. And he came up to me and we started chatting at the end of class. And like, he was more impressed that Spider-Man looked like him than like the president did. And it's like, okay. So, we just started talking about these things. And, I had a staff developer who said, you need to share what you do in your classroom. And I was like, look, that's what millennials do. And, teachers shouldn't show off. And I had a staff developer who said, no, I'll help you create social media and a website. And I did. And then an editor from PBS NewsHour, Vicky Pasquantonio, reached out to me and said, hey, would you want to write an article for us about comics in your classroom? And it just blew my mind that people outside of my classroom might actually care about what was going on. And I said, yeah. And so I wrote it. And that was the worst year of teaching I ever had. I resigned as department chair, as social studies department chair after 8 or 9 years. And I had those conversations with my wife about what am I going to do for my next career? Like I can't do this anymore. And it wasn't about what was going on in the classroom. It was all the other stuff that we know. And the day that I resigned as department chair, PBS published my first article. And it was just such a wow moment. And then I started talking to teachers around the world and people like you and so many other people who actually were doing what I was doing. And I had no idea that there was other people who were doing that. And ever since then, it just keeps snowballing. And I started giving keynote speeches and presenting at different Comic Cons and education conferences. I work with colleges. I work with the U.S. State Department, and then everybody kept telling me like, you gotta publish a book. You gotta, and I did. And so yeah, that's kind of where we are now. On Sunday, my family, we head out to San Diego for the Comic Con. We're presenting as a family. And then I'm doing a book signing and a presentation workshop at the San Diego Comic Con Museum on Sunday. And then I'll be at the Eisner Awards on Friday. So it's a very surreal, very humbling kind of an experience for sure.
I mean, it's such a interesting story to hear because, you know, not many people, and I know Mike said this when I had him on Monday. He said that we're teachers. We're never supposed to be celebrities. You know, we're supposed to just do what we're told and put our heads down. And I'm one that's always, my wife, if she would hear this, she'd die laughing. I'm one that don't like to put my head down. I don't like that. I'm axe to the grindstone. Yes, I will do what I can for my students. But at the same time, I always believed that you have to be personal. You know, like I hate, you know, my wife's an ELA teacher. I'm a social studies teacher. You know, we're the perfect union, you know, in content. But it's difficult to get people to buy in. And when I say people, students are easy to sell. It was my administration that was hard. And for a long time, I used to contact you and tell you this stuff, like how do I do this? What ways do I spin this? And folks, you don't understand how great it was to just be like, there's somebody else in the universe that I can reach out to that's going through the same thing, that he's giving me this solid advice. And then when you created your Facebook group and like I said, you've really created such a great network of teachers that are able to, across states, across the world, really connect and talk about this. And it's now becoming a cross discipline. And for those of you listening, I know I'm speaking in teacher speak. Cross discipline meaning that like it's not just social studies, math, science, it crosses all our disciplines. Because a lot of people don't like to to use a pop culture term, they don't like to cross the streams. Because if you do, bad things they believe happen, which it doesn't. It's actually good things happen.
Yeah, agreed.
So now that you've gotten to this point, your family is doing great things. I've seen your daughter is published.
Yep.
And you guys have done. Is there any other projects you guys are doing currently that you guys are giving us maybe a little teaser on?
Well, my daughter's looking for college next year, so we're kind of all in that. But the idea of the second book, I started doing research for my first comic book to put together about a story in World War II that means a lot to me, that always has impressed me. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of things that are always in the back burner, but I think after this year, we kind of need a break too. Like there's a lot. And next year I'm teaching a brand new course, an AP World History course that I wrote. And so, all the teacher type stuff, all the day-to-day stuff is a lot, and education is a lot for us right now. And my wife is a language arts teacher too, which is funny. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I mean, I teach courses at the University of Pennsylvania, and same thing, like you're saying, we taught math teachers, we taught science teachers, we taught art teachers, history teachers about reading and writing, and using comic books and pop culture as a vehicle. And so it's a natural fit across those disciplines. Absolutely.
So I noticed you have some awesome figures in the background, and I myself, being that we moved into our new house, it looks terrible behind me. So it's a work in progress. So I apologize in advance. But I do notice that you have some very cool figures in the background, and I want to kind of pick your brain. So obviously, I think it's your left, I see you have a mighty Thor, and I absolutely love that because I remember one of your Facebook posts was about that. I love that. Oh, I love that Sam Wilson, a big Captain America fan. So, question: who are some of your favorites that you have currently right now that kind of inspire you as to be a hero?
I would have to say, Jane Foster, Thor, and my daughter will be the first to correct you. She's not the female Thor; she's Thor.
Mm-hmm.
Just always resonated with me. Here's this female scientist, doctor, depending on what version you're reading, who has breast cancer, and every time she becomes Thor, it accelerates the cancer, and yet she continues to do it because it's the right thing to do. Talk about just this inspiring story. So really her, and then also Miss Marvel, the 16-year-old Pakistani American girl from Jersey City. Like, I just love her. I mean, there's so many great heroes, but I would say, and my favorite superhero team would be the Champions. I'm really waiting
Nice.
really waiting for them to start hitting the movies and things. You got Braun and Nova and all these guys, and Miss Marvel and Miles Morales. It's that, I think that next generation of movies is going to be what my own kids are growing up with, and I can't wait to see that happen.
So it's like you feel like that could be like the next level Avengers for our kids because I have a 13-year-old, I have a 17-year-old, and I have a 3-year-old. So I know that they've seen the Avengers, but I feel like I agree with you. I think Champions, like Children of the Atom, like those are probably the next level teams. They'll hear of the X-Men, they'll hear of the Avengers, but I think like those teams are going to be core. And I want to talk about inclusion because I think that you mentioned Kamala Khan, and yesterday on my podcast with my friend Dave, we were just talking about that. We think that Marvel put on a master class in inclusion with Miss Marvel. What do you think about that? Because you just said how great she is as a character, so I want to kind of glean your interest as a father and as a comic book fan. What do you think of that?
I mean, just my kids. So I'm 48. For me growing up, not a whole lot of diversity. You had Lando, you had Black Panther, you had a few things here or there. Of course, Wonder Woman, etc. But my kids are growing up with gay heroes and female heroes and Muslim heroes, and it's just normal to them. Like, it's not like when Sam Wilson became, Captain America, like certain, people freaked out about it and, we're ruining their childhood and all that kind of stuff. And I made a big deal of it in my classroom, and now it's just like, okay, like it's not, it's just the fights have been fought, and I think the fights have been won. And I think it sounds kind of, silly in a way, but I do think that these comics help our kids face the inclusion, the representation. And for them, it's all normal that our kids can literally see themselves as heroes, right? Regardless of their background. We've got trans heroes, we have gender fluid heroes. You name it in comics now. And it used to be such a big deal in headline news. And now I love that it's just, okay, it's just, there's, all right, we got it. There's another character who fill in the blank. And that's where we need to get as a society, where we're not so in shock, right? That, this character, that character. And there's still Steve Rogers. There's still, the traditional characters are still there. I just read an article on CNN about the new casting for the new Superman movie, that the actor is Jewish. And people are, well, so was the original Superman. So were Superman's creators. Like, it's comic books have always been political. Comic books have always been, kind of pushing that boundary sort of thing. And I just love it. Like, it's just like you said, like just looking around when students come into my room, everybody sees themselves literally within like seconds because of the posters I have up, the books that I have up. And we need that. You need to see yourself in the room. And sometimes I'll have a kid who just sees that book and they just, they give me that nod, like, all right, that's cool. Like, and sometimes that's all it takes. And so it's not even me forcing anything on anybody. It's just kind of like, here we all are. And for some of the kids, like, they don't know that there's a Korean Hulk, and it blows their mind. And a lot of the other kids are like, yeah, I knew that. What do you mean you didn't know that? And all these different things. And then my kids create their own superheroes and things like that, and their own comics. And that's what a lot of times that we see. It's that they're talking about these current day issues that these, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids know so very much about.
I mean, information's so readily at their fingertips too. It's like you can't spit in the wind without like Disney Plus putting out a show, or going to the internet and just being like, hey, there's because I know adversity. One of the things with adversity I faced was you couldn't really talk. And I'm from New York. If you couldn't tell, I live in North Carolina, but I'm from New York. And one of the things that you really don't like to talk about here is you can't talk about LGBTQ plus. That's like, and it's a no-no. Granted, in the middle school level, at the high school level, it's completely more acceptable. But we've had a lot of issues with that. And I remember I had talked about, like, I had books, like comic books in my classroom for Pride and for things like that. And as a social studies teacher, I was always torn. So I'm like, what is that line that I walk? Because I knew I had students that were trans. I knew I had students that were gender fluid. I knew I had students that were already in that. And I was like, I'm accepting of you, and you need to know that. And they knew that. They walked in the door. They were like, Saunders' classroom is his kingdom. Nobody messes with them. And I felt like that's something that you inspired me to do. Like you said, when a kid walks into your room and they look around and they're like, man, I know that. And I feel like that's who I represent, from anime to comic books or pop, whatever it is. It was just it's a great feeling. And I know that that's got to be something for you that feels like amazing.
It is. It's where the tough conversations you start off in the beginning of the year. And then when things blow up, like, you don't have to awkwardly shift because the kids already know that you're open to talking about things. And so I did a new lesson this year where I had the kids, I don't even know how many books I had out on World War II. And I had the kids go station to station, reading, comics, Time Life magazines, like all, textbooks, all these different things. And I had dozens and dozens and dozens of books. And I had a girl pull me aside. She's like, Mr. Smyth, you talked about that there were homosexual concentration camp victims, but you don't have any books or anything like that. Totally called me out on it. She's 100% right. And I was like, ooh, here, help me find some books. And so we did. And so I bought some books and we brought them in, and that it's that comfort level. She wasn't challenging me. She was like, yo, Smyth, and it was like, right there, I was like, boom, there it is. I don't have to know everything, for one thing. I mean, we had talked about it. And the kids feel comfortable sharing things with me that they know about that I don't. I mean, yes, I'm a history teacher, but it's impossible to know everything, right? I mean, there's just no way. And so that's just one example by her seeing the things that are in my room, by her feeling comfortable in what was there, that she felt comfortable not sending me an email, but coming up to me and saying, hey, what? And I was like, oh, absolutely, 100%.
So I want to just shout out everybody that's coming in the chat. Thank you. My friend LeBron, who's one of my mods for the channel, loves your T-shirt, and he also said that the X-Men is the X-Men political. I would say we argued this last night on the podcast. For y'all that don't know, the Outer Dimensions podcast, me and Dave, we did mention that it's, if you, as a historian, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Magneto, and Xavier, I could have a whole video of me and Tim talking about that. And then, of course, I love when people say these sorts of things. This is what we had on Monday. I had this. LeBron, I appreciate that. And I know Tim definitely got to appreciate hearing that. It's different. I had one teacher, and I want to ask you this as a question, see if you had this as well. We all have that one teacher that sticks out. And for me, I had Mr. Salerno. He was a lawyer who was a Vietnam vet, same age as my dad. His son was in my history class, and he was probably the most sarcastic, pain in the ass guy I ever had. But damn it, did he make me want to be a historian? Did you ever have a teacher like that from up to college, I'll say, that really inspired you to do that?
It was my dad. My dad, it was a Philly cop, didn't think he was educated, never went to college, but he would tell the most amazing, he just liked to read, right? And I say it all the time, I'm not a smart person. I just read a lot. And it's funny because the kids always say to me when they walk in my room, like, have you actually read all these books? Yes, that's why they're here. But it was just going, we spread my dad's ashes at Gettysburg, because we would go out to Gettysburg and my dad would start talking and people would just start standing around us. because he told he knew the human stories, and he made history human to me. And so I didn't really, the only teacher I had was my fourth grade teacher, Mr. Chudoff, in that he was a little wacky, and I mean that as a compliment. And like we would watch random Twilight Zone episodes and talk about the history. And so he could always connect things to history, even though it wasn't in that chapter that we are currently studying. And so I like to do those connections too. And then also my wife, like my wife was a teacher before I was, and she would just tell these stories about the things that she was doing. And it made me go back to school to be a teacher. And so for all those three people, I'm very grateful.
That's amazing. That just warms my heart. Like I hear that because, for me, my mom, before she passed, I lost her 10 years ago. And before she passed, I made a promise to her. I said, she's like, Andre, you have to be a social studies teacher. You've been in education. You've just kind of skirted the line. You've not dipped your toe in it. I need you to do it. And I became successful right before my daughter was born. I was licensed. I did everything. I've been doing it for a long time, and I love it. And I think it's a thankless job to many, but it's fulfilling. And I know that you and I love parlaying and seeing you parlay you're at the point where I want to parlay my career into, where I love this stuff and I want to parlay it into doing that. What would you tell people that are starting as teachers? Like, because I'm going to give you the story that I had, and I want to see if you would give similar advice or different. I was at my local comic book shop, so this is where the story's going to start. This was last week, and I was picking up my books, and there was a mom in there, and the mom was African American, and they were coming from the coast, and the son was going to UNC Pembroke, and my wife had taken her students there as part of a class trip. So the kid's talking to the cash rep, and the guy's like, "Yeah, I'm a teacher. I'm a band teacher. Blah 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 blah." So I'm like, "Ma'am, do you mind if I give you some advice to your son?" So the kid's 18, fresh faced, like I could tell, like gonna be going to college. I said, "Dude, be you." I said, "If you love all this stuff that you see in this store, bring a shelf. Start with a shelf and grow it." And I said, once your kids see that you connect with just that shelf, it'll grow. And he was just like, "Thank you," shook my hand. And then I'm paying for my comics, and I'm getting ready to leave. And the lady just kind of puts her hand on my shoulder, and she's like, I heard you and your wife are teachers. Thank you for what you do." And I almost bawled my eyes out walking out the store. I was like, that felt so privileged to hear that. What advice would you give someone like 18, 19, 17 that wants to be a teacher, loving what we love? I want to hear your advice.
So one of the best things I get to do is I get to work with education majors in colleges. And when I do, I share, in Pennsylvania, our evaluation that we get every year, right? So it's like all these charts and graphs. I have no idea what it means, right? But at the end of the day, the best I can ever be ranked is satisfactory. That's it. Like I can't be advanced. I can't be like attaboy. It's satisfactory. That's it. It's the most depressing piece of paper to get after pouring your heart and soul in after a year. And so I say to these kids, like, that's not what it's about, right? Like you can't take your self-satisfaction. You can't let that weigh down on you. Like, yes, I care what my principal thinks about me and my superintendent, but what I love about like what you and I are doing is, in a sense, that doesn't really matter because I get what I need from my students. I get what I need from being passionate about doing the things that I do. So like you told that kid, and I wish I could go back and tell myself this, when I first started teaching, because I got to the point where I was willing to walk out the door, where I was going to quit teaching. And I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to do it how I want to do it. And then if they want to fire me, they can fire me. And once I started doing that and seeing my own kids, my students get fired up, and then they started to share their passions with me. It's not always comics. It's not always hip hop. It's all these different things. And so they can say to me, "Hey, so you want me to do this, but can I do it this way?" And I'm like, "Yeah, surprise me. What can we do?" Right. And so here, I just happen to have it here, but this is one of them. This is one of my good news binders, right? So it's the best piece of advice I ever got from a principal when I started teaching. And he said, listen, you're going to have those days, right? You're going to have those days where, as a teacher, you want to save everybody. As a teacher, failures hit the hardest. I mean, we're literally in the job of saving lives. And so I've cried through meetings hysterically, like, I mean, just because there's something that's happening to a kid that you can't control and you can't help and all those things. And you know that. And so I could let that one failure, that's not my failure, although I'm going to feel that way, ruin me for the year. Right. But then I go back and I page through these emails and these letters and these handwritten cards and all these things. And it makes me cry every time I look through it, because it's humbling what we do in education. I mean, I don't know what it's just, I don't even have the words. Like I don't want to say, like, people are like, oh, teachers are heroes. No, we're people. We do what we do. It's a job. We get paid for it. We are, we deserve the respect and boundaries, and we need to have our own time with our own families and things. But man, like I was in the hospital. I had such a bad year, but I was in the hospital for a little over a week around Valentine's Day. Had a major surgery and things like that. The night nurse on Valentine's Day came in. And, we're talking and the night before my surgery, and she asked me what I did. And she was pretty much kind of bowed down to me. And this nurse who, like, literally saves lives, who I can't imagine what it's like to be in the medical profession right now and everything that they've been through. And she told me how inspiring my job is. She told me how hard we work. And it just blew my mind that here was this night nurse on Valentine's Day night who gets it. And so the national conversation about education is not great. But when you look at the polls about the local schools and the individual teachers, they're always very good. And it's because we're letting politicians control and weaponize education against us. And, we teachers need to control that message. And it's why we need to not be humble. It's why we need to share what's going on, the kick-ass things that we're doing in our classroom. And we need to share what our kids are doing to the rest of the world even. And I think that's going to help shut these people up, because they're not educators. They're not in the classroom. They don't know what's going on. I mean, I could do a whole conversation, all that stuff, but
oh no, you're preaching to the choir, brother, because I'm with you, because I've been in the trenches and I've hated that my principal, and this is where you guys are going to laugh, because we can go, I'm going to give a war story. And I know Tim's definitely can attest to he's had this in his career. I had my principal come in and, like, we were talking about Rwanda, the genocides in Rwanda, 7th graders. And some of these kids, are low. They don't understand. And I'm going to address something LeBron said. So this is why I'm tying this in. So the kids are low. They don't know what a machete is. They're like, Mr. Saunders, what's a machete? So I explained to them, and my principal's walking around the room. So I have my lesson plan up on the board, on the smart board. I'm going through the things, and I'm like, I'm defining what a machete is. And then I'm like, you know what? I show them a picture. I take the lesson down. I show them a picture of it. And I said, hey, my grandfather used to cut sugar cane in Puerto Rico when he was a kid. And he used to have a machete above his door. And it was like he kept it. And when he moved to New York, that was one of the things he brought with him as a constant reminder of where he came from to where he was going and where he put our family to. And my kids were like, wow, like, that's big. So at the end of the class, the kids are leaving the classroom. My principal goes up to me. She goes, why would you mention that? Like, that doesn't make any relevance to, see, face fault right there. Why would you say that? And I said, I looked at her. I was like, excuse me? Like, why is that relevant? These kids didn't know what the word was. And now I've given them a personal memory to that word. And now when they think of Rwanda and the genocide, they don't have to think, oh my God, it's terrible, which it was terrible. But they can now say, hey, Saunders' grandfather did that. And you know what? Like, that's a cool memory to something that's as inane and mundane as the word machete. And, like, these are just some of the horrible horror stories as teachers we deal with. So here's something LeBron says, and I want you to, like, look at this, and I want you to understand how powerful a message. He says that he wanted to be a teacher, but he's worried about being dyslexic and that his last name is Ball. Don't worry, there's some teachers with last names that, bro, we laugh at all of them. But here is something he said that really hits home. if I had teachers like you two, maybe I could spell. That's powerful in a lot of sense. So I want to know how would that hit you?
You're not going to, we all have something that we're dealing with. You're not going to fix dyslexia because you have the right teacher. Yeah, it can help. I think it's more about teachers being understanding, taking their time. My own son I talk about him all the time. He's a personal superhero of mine. He's got this really rare form of meningitis. He's got lots of nerve pain and aches and the whole thing. And it takes him longer to read things. And so he always feels bad about that because, education for some teachers can be all about the speed, which drives me nuts. He understands things on such a deep level, more so than most students I've ever met. And so we have to see the individual student and their strengths that we have in front of us. And comics, in a lot of ways, help us to do that. One of my student teachers was dyslexic. And one of the reasons why he became a teacher is because he was dyslexic. And he said, screw that noise and the teachers who didn't understand all this. We need people like me in education. And absolutely. And so that human piece of it all that we can get lost in the standardized testing and all that kind of stuff. That's what makes a great teacher. And so just by willing to talk about your dyslexia here, I think that's actually a power that you can have, and you're going to reach a lot of students. So I wouldn't see that as a hindrance. Yes, you've got a harder road, I think, than folks who don't. But also, we know a lot of the research and how much it does help with dyslexic readers, with autistic readers, and using comics for all those different things. And in a lot of ways, it actually helps to level the playing field.
It really does. And I've seen the research. I mean, my wife, like you said, both our wives are ELA teachers, and my wife is currently now on master's number 3, beginning to pursue her doctorate. And God bless her. I don't know how she does it. I look at her and I'm just like, you're my hero. Because I mean, just we're actually going to be presenting hopefully at Rhode Island Comic Con this year.
Oh yeah,
because Mike, my friends all pressured me. I'm going to go with this. They peer pressured me. They're like, "How do you have these friends that are like doing all this great stuff and you're not doing what you love doing?" They're like, "You preach, do what you love, but you're not doing it." And I'm like, "All right, fine, I'll do it." I was like, "All right, I got enough. I'm gonna follow. I'm gonna finally follow in the footsteps of the people that have, definitely laid the groundwork for me." So I have to ask this because one of the things I loved that your lesson plans you did was Star Wars. So how big an influence has Star Wars been in your life? As like G.I. Joe is a huge influence, obviously, for your first comic book. But what about Star Wars? Like what part of that do you feel like kind of messes with you, and where's your interest with that?
I think it's just, growing up a Star Wars kid. My dad wasn't into sports. I wasn't a big sports guy. My dad was kind of a hard nosed, by the book kind of a person, but we went and watched Star Wars movies together and Star Trek together and Indiana Jones together. And that became our common, bond. And then the history, the things that we could talk about. So where a lot of times, the guy thing is the bond over sports. We didn't have that. And so now I take my own kids to watch the same kind of things. And that's the amazing part of all this. Like our parents never had that. I mean, you literally study about the generation gap that comes about in the 1960s, where the greatest generation completely didn't understand the next generation at all. Where now our generations, yes, so certainly there's differences but we have a lot of commonalities too. The comics, a lot of the music, and a lot of the movies as we continue with the franchises and things like this. I mean, it's such a cool thing to be able to do that. And as we take like my father-in-law, so, you got 3 generations of people going to watch Indiana Jones 5, which incidentally I loved. I know.
I did too.
Yeah, go. And then Star Wars just started to blow my mind when I started to do the research about, Princess Leia is patterned after Joan of Arc, and about how George Lucas studied film from World War II to inform how he was going to visualize the TIE fighters. And then you get into the whole Nazi things and the First Order. And it's like, holy crap. Yes. Like, and that's what I teach all the time. Pop culture is a reflection of what's going on in the world around us, right? It is a societal artifact. And so, and language arts teachers, forgive me here, but Frankenstein, my favorite book, probably, is pop culture. It was influenced by the Industrial Revolution. It was pop culture for its time. And now we call it capital L literature. Shakespeare, pop culture, right? Like we know all these things. And yet some people can't move past that today when we talk about hip hop or comic books or Star Wars. But it's all there.
I have this love. I love hearing it, and I keep hearing you say it. And it's like my brain's like, don't ask, don't ask. I'm like, I'm gonna ask. What about hip hop do you love? What is, to me? I think of hip hop, and and I don't know if you saw the movie yet. I just saw it the other day, and I absolutely loved it. Transformers: Rise of the Beast.
Oh yeah, great soundtrack.
Can I just say, for a fan of hip hop, and I told my boy this last night, I said, if you are a fan of 90s hip hop, like that, the scene of Bumblebee jumping out of Stratosphere, that was like a win.
Yep.
So I have to ask, what's the hip hop song that got you, that hooked you on hip hop?
So just the album, A Nation a Million, from Public Enemy. Just, I don't, granted, as a white kid, but I grew up in Philly, right? And so we listened to what synth or, like that kind of stuff too. But when hip hop came out, it was just like, Fight the Power. It was just, it's an anthem, right? And so as a white kid, I get, as a poor Philly kid, I get some of the angst, I get some of the ideas, but it also widened my horizon to understand the historical and cultural battle, right? That civil rights issues are happening in the 90s, not just in the 1960s. And so, listen to that on my Walkman and then my Discman.
It feels good to hear that.
And then listen, like I just happen to have this here, the Smithsonian Anthology of Hip Hop.
Ooh, that looks dope.
So the Smithsonian recognizes hip hop as history. In the African American History Museum in DC, they've got Chuck D's boombox in the museum, right? When I talk about, so we annotate some Public Enemy when we start talking about the slave trade, and we start making some connections and how much has changed and how much has really not changed. And then I have my kids start to share modern day hip hop songs with me as similar anthems. And so we use hip hop from the late 70s, early 80s into the 90s when I come into it, and then today. And so again, high school, and I can say to the kids, like, listen, I'm 48. Like, you can share music with me that has curse words in it, whatever. Like, I'm good. And we put together a playlist and we talk about it. And no, you can't play every song in the classroom and things like that. And we also talk about hip hop as positive change and the positive songs and the positive messages, and how we don't denigrate all of country music because of some, wackadoo, uber patriotic type song. There's lots of different, country type songs and things like that. So we can't do it with rap. I grew up, you had NWA and gangster rap and all that stuff too. But even John Lewis, like the March graphic novels, Congressman John Lewis talked about, take a look at the lyrics. What are they talking about? Why are they talking about that? Don't get rid of the songs. Analyze, what's happening in the world around us that causes these lyrics to be written, and start there, right? Don't just shut down the music. For me growing up, that was when they started, for the first time, started putting the parental warning labels on the CDs. And my dad returned one of my CDs, which just made me love Public Enemy even more. But he was, 911 is a joke, doesn't sit well when your dad's a cop. But again, that's a whole other topic that I could talk about. But like Run DMC, I got my pop figures here and Run, and
nice.
Daryl McDaniels now, he publishes his own comic books. And I've talked with Daryl a few times at different cons and things, and he talks about how this shy, introverted, straight A kid, private school kid, when he went on stage, it was like putting on an Iron Man suit. Like, that wasn't him. Comic books are him. And it took him much, much longer and later in life to understand that. And so now he's pursuing really what is his true passion. And it's just kind of a cool thing to kind of see happen full circle.
Well, look at guys like DMX. I grew up in New York. So DMX came from, he says, oh, I'm from Staten Island. No, you're not. You're from Mount Vernon, New York. I know exactly where you're from. I used to live not that far from where you. So I know he went to private school in the school system where he went. But It's like he's popular. You look at guys like Wu-Tang Clan. Wu-Tang Clan are probably the epitome of modern pop culture, like revolutionaries, because they transcended their hip hop music. They went to comics. They did movies. They've done like, I mean, I can't. They've done action figures. They've done everything. It's like I think anybody that. Do you think anybody now in modern hip hop could even touch what guys like that laid the groundwork for them? Is there
No,
anybody modern that could do that's giving that message similar to what we had growing up?
no, because you're talking about groundbreaking, new genre of, you're never going to match that. You know what I mean? I don't think. And granted, I'm 48, 49-year-old, and there'll be a 16-year-old who would tear me apart for saying something.
Oh yeah,
like that.
we get. My son would tear me apart right now.
Yeah.
He'd be like, "Dad, what are you talking about?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because
But no,
I mean, like, look, who do we have? Who do we have now? You have what, Drake? I mean, Drake would probably be the closest, I would say. Common.
well, right. When you're talking about Andre, wow, although that's getting old, but Common is talk about positive messages and civil rights messages and things like that. Right? No, agreed. Yeah, I can't, but not on the same level. I just, Chuck
Mos
D.
Def.
No. Yeah, and again, people are gonna tear
If
us
you're gonna
apart.
hate us, listen. Hate us in the comments. I'm 44, about to be 45 next week. So listen, y'all can hate on us. I know what good hip hop is, and he definitely knows what good hip hop is. When you come from a big city, you know what's good, but especially what was playing, because, like we said, they were groundbreaking.
Right.
There's no, I don't think that there's that, and there hasn't been like a rock group, a pop group. Michael Jackson, king of pop.
Right.
I used him in the classroom. What you did with creating that playlist, I did something similar. And we were using that for like war music, like speaking about war propaganda. And I've had ELA teachers do the same thing to analyze lyrics based on like stuff that they've seen as a Tupac. I mean, Tupac, another groundbreaking, amazing dude.
And Biggie,
yeah. I mean, R.I.P. We can't ever get anybody as good as that. I love this, folks. You don't understand. Getting to have these, there hasn't been real music in years. That is true. But again, we're old fuddy-duddies. Trust me, our teenagers will gladly tell us that we are wrong.
Right. And that's fine.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that's fine. And a lot of times the kids will play music for me, and I'm like, ooh, like stuff. It's true. As much as you don't want it to, you start to reach a certain age, and you just have no idea who these people are anymore. And so it's the young people. God, that makes me sound old, but it's my students who, I ask them that's two questions I asked them in the beginning of the year. What music do you listen to, and what are you reading? And that just opens up entire conversations and doors to talk about different things. And I listen to, my wife and I are going to a Jason Mraz concert in a couple of weeks. Like
nice.
I love music. Like I don't like death metal, and I don't like real hardcore like country music. But other than that, I'm really open-minded. And I think that's where you got to be too.
It helps. And it actually is a great bridging tool in the classroom, because I would play, like, I know that there's a lot of talk about lo-fi hip hop, that you can play that when people are reading, because it actually helps stimulate the mind. And I mean, there's just so much research on it. And then like I said, we can go into the analytics of all that, which we won't, because I've learned that some people don't like teacher speak. And I get it. For the norms, listen, me and Tim share a special bond. We are not only geek, we are teacher geek. So you have teacher speak, and then you have geek speak. So you gotta it's like muggles. There's people that don't understand either one. So you gotta find the middle ground.
I say it all the time. I say to my daughter, like, we're like in this weird Venn diagram of educators and nerds, and there's very few of us who are like right there in the center of it all. Yeah,
it's true. It's very difficult. So I'm going to hit you with some collector stuff, because I know that a lot of the times that we collect comics, which I know you do, and I know you read weeklies, because I like I said, I follow you actively on social media. So what are you reading right now that's like hyper interesting that's
out? Let's see. Well, first, the He-Man Effect. I don't know if you. So,
it
just came out yesterday. I haven't read it yet, but it's an illustrated graphic novel about like G.I. Joe and He-Man and the impact of TV and what that did to our generation and stuff like that. It's really so, and there's all kinds of annotations in the back, which is why I got it. Like it's so well researched.
Oh.
So I'll be reading that tonight.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna get this book.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's great. And then I mean, I just happen to have my whole thing here, but DC just tripped up into this new. Where is it?
Wait, you talking about the new heroes like Vigil, Spirit World?
There's this Nightmare. Oh, there you go. Night Terrors. That's what's going on.
Yeah, the new event.
Yeah. So what's cool is they've got every character. Like I was just reading Poison Ivy. There's like 2 comics, and it's like, what would their worst nightmare be like? And so Batman has to relive the death of his parents, of course, but then he turns into the person who did it. G. Willow Wilson wrote the Poison Ivy, and it's this idea of this like super happy, like Batman is their neighbor, and like all the like it's just this whole you're like, oh, all right, yeah. And so I'm kind of thinking like that would be a really neat writing assignment, like in a language arts class. Like, all right, who's your favorite hero? Could be a comic book, could be a rap artist, could be whatever. What would be their worst nightmare, kind of a thing? Like, what would their reality? And then the comics get into this person's reality and this person's reality are both polar opposites. So what's good for one is awful for the other. So it's almost, then it kind of gets into this whole idea is what is hell? Because hell for one person is completely different, could be a heaven for somebody else. So it's this whole like multi-layered kind of a thing that's going on in DC Comics right now, which is it's just absolutely fascinating. And it's a summer event and that kind of stuff that goes on. And then the other thing that I do all the time, like when they do the reprints, like they just did, when Hulk and Wolverine and stuff like that. So the reason why I buy them is because when they reprint them, they reprint the original.
Remember that?
Yeah, advertisements. So I use stuff like this in my classroom. The first week of school is I have the kids go and read older comics as like a historical artifact. And so what can you tell us about that society at that time? And so we talk about pricing. We talk about like Atari had 1 button on the joystick, right? We talk about like all that kind of stuff. And it opens their mind to like history's all around us, right? It's music and it's comics and it's TV shows. And it's, Star Trek was a protest against the Vietnam War, like all these things that are going on. And it just kind of blows their mind a little bit, particularly like the honors and AP kids, because they just want to spit back the right answer a lot of times. And that like they know how to do school. And they struggle with me the first couple of weeks of school because they really have to think in my class because there's no right answer a lot of times. And that's the kind of stuff that kind of opens up those doors.
I'm hoping that our teenage daughter, she's extremely smart. She's AIG. She reads manga. She reads comics. She loves pop culture. She's big into Japanese. She's loving Japanese stuff. And I speak it, so I've been trying to like get her more involved in it, right?
Nice.
But she's very much, when it comes to her work, I have to give you the perfect answer this way. And I'm like, sweetie, it's okay. Like, it's okay if you don't give him give him your answer. No. I need to give him this answer. And I'm like, no, it's so hard. How do we break that paradigm? How do we, I always remember that there was, I couldn't give the perfect answer because I wasn't always great, but I mean, it's okay to be wrong.
Well,
I feel like we've messed up in that.
That's it. I fail as a teacher. I have stopped lessons in the middle and said, "Oh, this sucks. All right, so what can we read?" And I think when the kids see you do that, I think that sends a powerful message. But I don't know if I have it here because it's probably in my classroom, but I use Kyle Baker's Nat Turner. So it's a wordless graphic novel based on the Confessions of Nat Turner. And what I have my kids do is they read the first chapter, and their job is to go through and tell me what's going on in each panel. And they really start to freak out because there's no words, and it's completely open to interpretation. And so the kids keep coming up to me, and they're like, "Well, what's this?" And I'm like, "It's whatever you think it is, right? Show me the work. What are you looking at?" And then all of a sudden the conversation starts to develop at the tables because the kids see the same exact thing and they think 5 different things about it. And they're all right. Every one of them is 100% right. And and I just got in a fight on a Facebook page with a history teacher about this, that history is not a collection of facts. There are certain things, yes, we can agree on, but the hows and the whys and man, is that open for interpretation. And so I say to the kids, like, my class should be like math class. Show me your work, because even if you're wrong, if you show me what you're thinking, why you're thinking, how you got there, that's the important part of the journey. Historians get things wrong all the time. I always say I would love to have like a centurion come into our classroom as we're talking about Rome and be like, yeah, no, like that's completely incorrect. And it happens all the time.
I would love to have that with like a samurai. Bring a samurai into the classroom. How was Tokugawa? How was that Meiji Restoration? Did you really like the fact that Western civilization was creeping into you in Japan? You know, like I'd love to see that with any major like historian. I'd love to. It's like have the Bill and Ted moment. You know, like can I go meet these people and just have that conversation? Like, you know, actually that's a good question to ask you as a fellow historian. If you had to pick like a famous period of time or person, who would you want to bring into your classroom to have like that discussion?
You're going Bill and Ted on me here.
Yeah, I had to.
So, if you were to ask me like the one person I would most want to meet, I've already met him, and that, Congressman John Lewis. I think I would love to have like Malcolm X come in and just set things straight, right? Like all the misinterpretation that we have about his violent rhetoric and all that kind of stuff, right? And kind of set things where, but even King, where King was not the 100% lovable. Like, I mean, he spoke out about poverty and war and all these different things that we tend to ignore. Boy, that would be a fascinating kind of a conversation to have. But I don't know. I've always like Joan of Arc. I mean, you're talking about a 17-year-old leading the armies of France, right? Gets burned at the stake. There's just so many type folks that. I don't know. Nero, like, what's your problem?
Cleopatra. Why? Right. What were you doing? What was going on there?
Yeah, I don't know. Emperor Hirohito, like, what's going through his mind when he starts losing power? Like, there's all kinds of folks that would be cool to talk to.
Dude, imagine
Putin, so I could punch him in the face. It's anybody.
Exactly, Putin. I'd love to give him a little Dusty Rhodes elbow.
Yeah, right.
I mean, if I had to pick, even if I could pick one, like, who would I want to go talk to? Hannibal. Would I want to talk to, Genghis Khan? I mean, the fact that the dude's genealogy is still existent to this day is amazing. Like there's so many, like Stalin. I'd love to have a conversation with Stalin.
The Man of Steel. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like there's so many, like Churchill. Churchill's another one. Like I could go down the gamut. Like you said, Joan of Arc would be one I'd love to pick her brain. Mother Teresa.
Oh.
Gandhi,
yeah.
I mean, it's Martin Luther King, obviously. Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
Kennedy, would love to have picked his brain.
It's funny that you mentioned Hannibal, because this book is the reason why I became a teacher. My dad had it, and I happened to pick it up when I was a young kid. And just this dude who came, for one thing, he's African, which totally, I mean, who studies African history back, decades ago and, that kind of stuff. And just what he did by, going in there. And because I always loved the Roman Empire, and it was always mythologized and romanticized. And this dude's kicking their asses like left and right. And oh my God. And then and bring it full circle. It's such a sad ending. Like he doesn't lose in battle. He loses because he doesn't get the support he needs from home. And because the Romans have a stronger navy, and then the punishment that they do to Carthage, and then what happens to Africa, and as Western civilization starts to take over, and this turning point, and like I just wow, I just remember reading this book, and before my dad passed, he asked me what I wanted, and I said that's the book I want, and he signed it, and it gave it to me. But I can like literally point to the one book that made me want to become a history teacher.
That's awesome. I don't even think there was a book for me. I think I just remember Mr. Salerno just teaching and loved hearing his stories about Vietnam and how very similar to what's hearing my dad talk about it at home, and because my dad was in the Navy. My mentor in college, and he was also one of my professors. He was an African studies professor, but he was in the Navy, but he didn't go into the Navy fighting. He was actually a correspondent in the Navy. So he was actually doing all like basically writing the news for the Navy and giving it out to the world. And he got to travel. And that was one of his big things. And he had such a great world perspective. And I try to always give that to kids, and I try to bring that to people. And I feel like comics give us that gateway, and just the world gives you like we have such a great set of tools. So I'm gonna hit you with a question, as in the softball questions. These are the easy ones that you can knock out the park for me. Non-teacher related. Favorite movie of all time?
Empire.
Best bridge movie? I'll give it that. Actually, I would say tied as a bridge movie because Two Towers, Lord of the Rings. That's another great bridge movie.
Yeah.
Favorite book you've ever read, excluding that one, Hannibal, that got you to teach.
Yeah, just because we're on the topic, Walking with the Wind was an autobiography from John Lewis.
He's an amazing man that he was.
Yeah.
LeBron, if you have a question, sure, shoot. I love softballing questions to get to know him better because, like I said, when you get to see somebody on social media and you get to have these moments of talking, it's such a great way to make friends. So
it's just funny. I have because I run a pop culture club at my school, and we have up a sign that says you're not allowed to ask what's better, Marvel or DC. Like we don't do that here.
Oh, notice I didn't notice. I will never ask that. Oh, so are you a gamer?
Used to be like huge gamer. And I used to like games like World of Warcraft and Civilization and GoldenEye, James Bond and stuff like that. But now my son, as he's getting older, has started to get me back into things. But it's funny because he likes old school gaming.
So does he play Pokemon?
He loves Pokemon. We just got him a 3DS. Like we had to track one of those down.
Wow.
Yeah.
You should have hit me up. We have. My daughter has one. Doesn't even touch it. We would have. We would have given it to you. You would have been able to get it.
But I was like the story games, like Assassin's Creed, like that kind of stuff. I just always loved the stories.
So favorite Pokemon is what we're getting here from the group.
My son would kill me. I don't know anything about Pokemon except for Pokemon. That's about it.
So that's fair. All right. So favorite Ninja Turtle.
Oh, well, it's got to be Donatello because when I worked at Toys R Us, moment of silence for Toys R Us.
R.I.P.
Yeah, that was one of my jobs. Was I used to dress up like Donatello, and the kids just went nuts. Like it was awesome.
See, that's interesting because my littlest one loves Raphael. My wife likes Raphael. I like Leonardo.
Yeah,
but I act like Raphael. So
there you go. I had a really cool moment this year. So I tend to get a lot of the kids from our autistic program, which we know, we're having more and more autistic kids. And it's comic books, a lot of ways that pull them in. And these kids know, like encyclopedia of information, right? So this girl was being introduced to our school, new student. So they brought her to me to talk to me. And she goes, yeah, well, you like turtles, but did you know that there's female turtles? And I go, oh, you mean like Venus and Jenica? And she was like, oh, I want to go here. Like, oh, it was the first time she felt like she was seen and heard, and there was another person like her at the school. It was such a cool moment.
I love that because I've done that too. Like I've hit the kids with like, oh wait, you mean like this, and this, and like, or when it was gaming, like I used to have kids that would always, because my brother's 33 now or 32, sorry. So he is a gamer, and because we had that age gap, that's been like our bridge that keeps us very relevant with each other. And I remember talking about Destiny. Like I played a first-person shooter, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, "Yeah, man, I was just doing I was texting my brother, and I was like, man, I had a picture on the wall. They're like, man, what do you know about Destiny? I said, oh, you mean that raid I just did last night that we almost got world's first? And they're like, oh, they're like, Saunders, you trying to get world's first? And I'm like, yeah, you do realize that I have a life outside the weekend.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not a robot that I plug into the wall in this closet. I used to have a closet that I open it up and always had cables hanging in it. I said, yeah, I reconnect over here. And when you guys leave on Friday, I go in here and on Monday I pop out of it. But they're like, well, where do you go? One kid actually asked me, where do you go when you're not here? Like, how do you charge? And I'm like, oh, it's like those charge stations for cars, But they always I used to love those connection moments, like when they don't realize that you're like,
Yeah.
oh crap,
I will lose my class for 15 minutes when I mention that I play Clash of Clans, because then it's what level are your towers? Can I be in your clan? I'm like, no, like, all that kind of stuff. Like, there's a chat feature. No, I'm not being, that kind of stuff. But it's just silly things like that. You're right. It's all about connecting somehow, some way with as many kids as you can.
And that's the best part about what we have here in the realm of social media, and in just collecting. Like, I one of the things I strive to do is, I've been through a lot with YouTube. Like, I've had several channels, and I've started them and I've closed them because it just didn't vibe. This feels like I'm doing the right thing, and when I've introduced people to what we do, I've always believed in inclusion. I feel like we have to have a similar message, you know, and it doesn't always have to be like, oh, we collect the same toys or we collect the same hobbies. I feel like the message has always been support the community, build the community, and I always love that. I would love for you to join us. I'd love to give you an invite into this group, because I just feel like you vibe with us. A lot of my friends that are collectors are guys that would ask these questions, that have been in the chat, that are going to be watching on the replay, that are like, hey, this is a guy that we get. And it's hard because it's a friend group too. I mean, we are friends, but outside of that, I think that you are what a lot of the guys and myself strive to do, which is not only build the community, put it out there that the community exists, and look for the groundswell. So if you would like to, I'm extending you an invite to join us. I think you are like a hell of an amazing guy. Like I said, I know you personally for years, and I know that my friends were like posting it all over social media, blasting it. They're like, man, Andre's getting this guy. You got to bring him in. Bring him in. Like, come on in, guys. And I'm like, look, and my friend says, I want to be your friend. So you've already it's like Buzz Lightyear, dude. And Woody, you've got a friend in me.
There you go. Yeah, let me know. And what's funny, people don't believe me, but I am really an introverted person.
He is, folks.
And and I have a shirt that I'll be wearing at San Diego Comic-Con. It says introverted but willing to talk about comics, and that's what it's all about. It's finding people who have a passion that you share, and that's how a lot of these kids that are on the outside, like I was when I was in school. It's why I started a pop culture club, because these kids who didn't feel like they belong, it gives them a place to be. And so, yeah, let me know.
I will. And the final question that LeBron wants to know, and this is going to be the final question I'm going to ask. I'm probably going to make this a thing I permanently do. Pineapple on pizza, right or wrong?
I don't think there's a right or wrong. My daughter ordered it from Domino's. Now that's wrong. Domino's is wrong. But
yes.
Her and her friends ordered it, and I had it, and I was like, all right, I think it's an every once in a while thing. But I'm more of a like a green peppers or pepperoni kind of a person.
See, I'm with that. So, guys, I want to thank you guys for in the chat for being as very active and very involved. It makes me very happy. Again, Tim, give us some of your socials. Where can these people find you and see what you're doing and follow the journey that you're on?
So there's a Facebook group, if you're still on Facebook, and it's Comic Book Teachers. And that's, we're in there with artists and publishers and teachers and things. On social, I'm at History Comics. And then my website is teachingwithcomics.com.
And he has a book, folks. I am going to definitely purchase a copy from you so I can get it signed by you, because I need that. My wife was laughing because she's like, oh, you need to have that in the bookshop. I'm like, I want him to sign it. I'm going to buy it from him. Like I said, I will buy it from him directly and get him to sign it and bring and mail it. So I want that, because I was like, I could order from Amazon, but Amazon will get the money. Right. So we got to talk. You and I have to talk outside of here, so I can PayPal you, get the book signed, and because I would love after you're done with your whole trip, though. So
sweet. Thank you.
And we're going to keep our fingers crossed for you folks. Like I said, he's an Eisner Award nominee. Let's hope that we hear some positive stuff on the social medias. I am super excited for you and to see the journey you're on. I'm glad you and your family are seeing such a great level of success, and we can't wait to see what's coming down the pipe for you.
All right. Thanks, Trey. I feel like we've had this conversation a million times, and I've known you forever. It's kind of funny. So thank you.
I try to listen. I try to make all these things easy and fun, and I agree. Tim does rock. I mean, that's why I wanted him on here. I mean, it's like he's inspired me, and I've had students tell me that I've inspired them. So by proxy, whenever somebody inspires me, I have to bring them on and give them that platform to speak on. And you've always been a big proponent about that, and I love what you do. And like I said, any way I can support you and through what you're doing with what you're doing in the classroom and what you're doing with these talks, I will gladly put it out there for it to be seen. So
and good luck with your presentation too. That's awesome.
Oh, trust me, me and the wife are going to be working on it. We got a couple months to work on it, so we got to I think we're going to fine tune one of mine. Nice. So, but we'll see. I may have to run it by you and just get to pick your brain and see what you think. But I know I'm going to try to get you in the summer because I know once August hits, it's going to be school time. So,
yep. I always tell my friends, you'll see me after Halloween. That's about it. Yeah.
See, so you get him now, folks. If I can get him back here, it'll be later. We may get him back here after August or like I say after Halloween. So before Christmas. So thank you, Tim. Thank you, guys, and my friends. Make sure you tune in to next week. We got some more. We have Deborah Benjamin going to be coming on, who I've seen her work with Tim. So I got her. She's going to be coming on next week, Thursday, and just like I said, it'll be 3:00, same time as always. And again, thank you guys. Thank you, Tim. Stay geeky, y'all. Peace.